Penn State picks up its 5th defensive back commit of the cycle. 3-star cornerback Jaziel Hart joins the Nittany Lions 2026 class. And don't let that ranking deceive you.
You are Locked On Nittany Lions, your daily podcast on the Penn State Nittany Lions. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are locked on to Penn State football recruiting, and thank you so much as always for checking out another edition of Locked On Nittany Lions. My name is Zach Seyko, and I am your host of the #1 Penn State sports podcast out there, credentialed media member for both Penn State football and Penn State wrestling. We do this daily here. Thank you so much to the everydayers who make us a part of your routine each and every day. If you are new to the show, subscribe to the YouTube channel and wherever you get your podcasts. We're talking about Jaziel Hart here, the latest commitment to the class of 2026, what his impact is, what he brings to the Nittany Lions. So that's 8 defensive backs in this class. I mean, is that a possibility here? That's the kind of impact as Penn State just continues to load up at defensive back. But first, we're going to begin with Jaziel Hart and who he is as a football player. I want to just start with the basics here. He is a consensus 3-star defensive back, 3-star cornerback specifically. Now, On3 does have him listed as a 4-star, but it's across the board. He's about at that 88, 89 overall grade. He's out of the state of Virginia, so Penn State once again goes into the state of Virginia and gets somebody that, frankly, is a quiet riser in this 2026 cycle. Now, despite having, this is why I say don't let the ranking fool you, because it says 3-star, but why were schools like Michigan, Notre Dame, Tennessee, Virginia Tech all vying for his commitment here? So I guess these programs didn't get the memo that, okay, if he's just your everyday 3-star, then again, Michigan, Notre Dame, Tennessee, an SEC school being in his top 5, but Penn State is the one that wins out here, is the one that ultimately prevails. Talked about this briefly on the previous episode. It's actually the one that went up today for your Thursday show here. Talked with Brian Smith, recruiting expert with the Locked On Podcast Network, and just spoke to Hart's versatility, what he's able to do as an athlete, as a football player, and just to bring up those traits again. Explosive, he's fluid, twitchy. I would just say it's the body control that he possesses that makes him very sticky in coverage. I think he's instinctual. He just gets the game very well. He's not easily, when he's particularly a cornerback, because he does a lot of different things. He'll play a little bit of running back. He'll play wide receiver. He'll play cornerback. He can play safety for where he is right now in high school. And it's that ability to not get phased or tricked. He knows what to expect, and it's almost instinctive the way that he's able to read a quarterback if he's playing back in zone coverage, or the way that he's able to read a wide receiver and almost run the route for him. Because some immediate criticisms that are going to come up is that, well, he's not the fastest defensive back in the world or anything like that. What I really like about is his physicality. He can get faster. Any player can get faster, but I like his acceleration. I like how he is in terms, he's smooth in terms of the way that he's able to cover. So footwork, that's going to be extremely important here when you're a cornerback. I would say maybe the first initial comparison, and some people might maybe not think of this as highly, but Kalen King was good at the collegiate level. I think Kalen King is one of the first players that comes to mind here because of that physicality. He can press, he can play man, he can play zone, but I think that speed does need to catch up to him a little bit here. So I think this is a cornerback that Penn State took for a reason. I am never going to doubt when they take a commitment here. So just because the ranking says something, Penn State, Terry Smith, Anthony Poindexter, the people that are heavily involved in recruiting cornerbacks and safeties here, for the most part, are going to be correct. I'm going to trust their judgment and their internal scouting at this point in time, as opposed to the combination of the recruiting services. Again, just for an example, Isaac Chukura. This episode's about Jaziel Hart and the defensive backs, but I want to bring up once again that somebody like Isaac Chukura, who is listed via On3 as a player outside of the top 1,000 nationally, just won an MVP award at a regional combine, if you will, with the All-22 and Elite 11. The Elite 11 separate, but they're together. The All-22 regional skills camp for offensive and defensive skilled positions, and he won MVP. Yeah, just your everyday 3-star, right? Let's begin to get into the impact of this commitment. So I pose this question. I imagine some fans that are heavily involved in recruiting as well want to kind of understand what Penn State's thinking here, what the ultimate projection is for them. Why take a 5th defensive back fairly early in the cycle? Because I want to ask, do you have space at the end of the day? Because there are still other names that easily should be more prioritized here. It's not to be disrespectful to Jaziel Hart. Again, they take his commitment for a reason. He has a lot of upside and a lot of potential still, just your natural football traits that automatically stand out on his tape. But Joey O'Brien's still out there. Khary Adams is still out there. Dorian Barney. All of these players would rank higher on my defensive backboard, and they probably do for Penn State. So I am going to trust Anthony Poindexter and Terry Smith because they wouldn't have accepted Hart's commitment. But I also think about the timing of it. Okay, do you want to play the long game? Do you want to risk that he ultimately commits to, in the conference, Michigan was in his top 5, or Notre Dame, right? Another regional school that, no, they're not in a conference, but hey, you just met Notre Dame in the playoff. Do you want somebody with Hart's potential to go off to another school? So I don't think this really changes anything. What it does is it makes Penn State's plans here for the 2026 class as, okay, you're just going to have to load up at cornerback and defensive back here because you have 5 overall. Between the safeties right now in Daryl Carey and Matt Sieg, and then now you have the cornerbacks. And David Davis is an athlete, but right now I think he projects as a cornerback, could play safety too. So you have your 2 true cornerbacks with Jaziel Hart and Julian Peterson. If you look at it from that framing, then you still have a chance to add 2 more corners here, and it's still being realistic with a Khary Adams and a Dorian Barney. So Penn State, I'm going to trust the plan here. They run a 4-2-5. They run a 4-2-5. I don't think this jeopardizes anything. It's not going to push out. It's not going to alienate a Khary Adams, who was crystal balled by 24/7 to land with Penn State. A Dorian Barney to land with Penn State on 3, projected him to join the Nittany Lions here. So if this was going to ruin their chances, and let me throw out Brandon Arrington again as that 5-star cornerback that we talked about at length. If Hart was going to ruin Penn State's chances for any of those prospects, I don't think, and that also is telling too. If any of those players are going to be scared away by another commitment at their position, means that they're probably not necessarily worth the commitment at the end of the day. Jaziel Hart, 3-star cornerback. He plays much better than his rating. That's typically how these conversations go because Penn State does its own scouting. So they're ahead of any of them on 3, 24/7, Rivals, ESPN, you name it here. Listed at 6 foot, 170 pounds, versatile athlete. He's a smooth athlete, very talented, and the latest commitment to Penn State's class of 2026. Again, Penn State's taking a lot of defensive backs here in this class of 2026. There's a reason for it. We'll talk about that further, plus the overall outlook of this 2026 class, aside from cornerbacks and safeties. That is all coming up next here on Locked On Nittany Lions. This episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out or online shopping, entertainment, it's easy to lose track. And that's where Monarch Money comes in. It's your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center where you can track all of your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So you stop just managing your money and you start building wealth. You get surprising insights. So when I started using Monarch for myself, I realized just how much I was spending on different things. Dining out or groceries or package deliveries, you name it. Now I get to budget smarter and save more. You also get the all-in-one convenience. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track your spending, and even plan long-term goals. You'll get easy collaboration. Managing money with your partner is smoother than ever. You can track your shared and personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page without any of the stress. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for, get this, 50% off your first year. That is right. 50% off your first year. That is monarchmoney.com. Code LOCKEDONCollege for half off your first year. So why is Penn State loading up a defensive back? Well, they run a 4-2-5. Jim Knowles isn't going anywhere. And this is what Penn State has been running for the past, I would say, a couple of seasons. It'll be going on 5 years by the time that Jim Knowles' contract is up. We'll see if they renew and everything. That's not what this conversation is about. But there is a need for defensive back. I also want to talk about how Penn State doesn't just play 11 defenders. We talked to Steve Jones, if anybody missed that, the play-by-play voice of Penn State football, and he mentioned the number 25, meaning that Penn State is going to rotate in 25 different players for the most part. So instead of just 11, so yeah, here's the starters and this and that, but the 2 deep depth chart is everything. And when there's that much playing time to go around, that's great for longevity. That's great for depth. Players can stay fresh. They can stay as close to 100% as possible. If you need a drive off, boom, you have the comparable talent to go in and take over. So it's not a clear, okay, this guy's the starter, but this guy who's a backup is not much further behind him. So I don't think any of these players, even though the class seems like it's loading up, they're not afraid of competition, and actually they're going to play for the most part if they happen to pan out. You also have to remember the transfer portal, that the transfer portal is going to have its benefits. You're going to be able to bring in complementary players or guys that you can throw right into the lineup. For example, an AJ Harris, who is slowly turning into a superstar, or somebody like a King Mack who actually leaves and then he comes back. And then you don't know what the transfer portal, so it's almost an insurance type of thing. After this season, we'll see how everything goes, but you might be losing your star cornerback in AJ Harris to the NFL draft. I imagine if all things go well, he will go into the 2026 NFL draft. You're also guaranteed to lose Zach Seyko. You're losing 2 starters there, and I don't know that there's an immediate answer right away. Elliott Washington and Davian Collins are going to give you a lot, for example, this season. But what's the immediate answer for Zach Seyko there? Okay. Dejon Lane, right? There's a lot of players that you're going to, as they move up and their responsibilities will grow and increase, you need that next group of players to step up as well. So in the scheme of things, the class of 2025 specifically, to speak to Adarius Dixon, that class and Jameer Joseph and everything, Penn State's looking to add more players in this class to go along with that because they need the numbers, they need the resources there at defensive back, and it's the versatility. David Davis isn't guaranteed to play cornerback, for example. Brian Smith made the case that, hey, Jaziel Hart is so, and that's the way he's utilized now at it with his high school team, that Hart, but I think Hart's going to play cornerback. I think that's what Penn State is recruiting him as, but he could play wide receiver if you absolutely needed him to. I think he's coming in more so as a cornerback, as a defensive back primarily. But then there's Joey O'Brien, right? So what this tells me about this is that wide receiver is finished. I don't think that Penn State's going now. This would surprise me. Never say never. And I'm happy to be proven wrong, but I do believe that they're finished at wide receiver. They have their 3 commitments. If you have somebody like David Davis, who is almost a half commit at 2 different positions, and then you get Joey O'Brien in there, ideally, right? And so I'm doing a little bit of projecting and hypotheticals here. Joey O'Brien commits, okay, you have another half wide receiver commit and a half safety commit. Meaning, if you combine David Davis, his commitment of a half, and then Joey O'Brien's commitment of a half wide receiver, there you have 4 wide receiver prospects. And if they ultimately settle in at that position, you potentially have 5. So right now, Penn State has 3 true wide receivers, for example, here in Davion Brown, Jasir Rogers, and LeVar Keys. That's what this tells me, is that they're finished at wide receiver. So I know this is about defensive back and cornerback and everything else, but with the players that they are recruiting specifically, wide receiver, I can tell you, is finished. Obviously, quarterback is finished. They have 2 quarterbacks in this class of 2026. And I want to mention that Troy Huhn did get an at-large invite to the Elite 11, meaning that he is considered one of the top 20 quarterback prospects in the nation when all is said and done here. I did mention that it was a possibility that they could get an at-large invite, Peyton Falzone or Troy Huhn there. And Huhn, who has now been invited to the Under Armour game, as well as the Elite 11 now, is showing that he should not be just looked past. Huhn is a quality quarterback prospect. I know what I've said about Peyton Falzone. I think his ceiling is higher than Troy Huhn's, but right now the more polished prospect, the better passer at this point in time. I would say Falzone is easily the better overall athlete because of what he can do with his dual threat abilities. But in terms of quarterback play, it's Troy Huhn. Falzone is going to have to put in the extra work, the extra hours to surpass Troy Huhn if he wants to do that at this case, at this juncture, at this point in time. Penn State's looking to add more defensive linemen. We know that for a fact. Moving up a Daniel Jennings to the class of 2025, you now have an opening for defensive line. You have another opening for defensive line, particularly defensive end. They have 2 defensive tackle commit. Alex Haskell's in an interesting spot, actually, because he could stay at this 265, 270 pounds and be college ready at strong side defensive end. If they try to move him to the inside, defensive interior, defensive tackle, which they absolutely could and should do, he's going to be effective wherever you play him at the end of the day. But I've seen that Penn State continues to end up in multiple top 4s for some solid 4-star recruits, particularly at defensive tackle. So maybe Penn State's able to land 2 more there. They're also going to be targeting, of course, a Carter Meadows, 5-star defensive end, and Luke Wafel, who I do think has 5-star potential. And Penn State, I would imagine, is the favorite here, not only because they have his older brother in Owen Wafel, but Luke Wafel's recruitment it seems like Penn State's always been the silent leader, but they definitely have tough competition here. So as it stands, the class of 2026, according to On3, is ranked 11th in the nation, 4th in the Big Ten. They have 17 overall commitments. You have 2 quarterbacks, you have a running back, you have 3 wide receivers. Penn State just continues to check off the boxes that they want. I would say that you need to get some more in the trenches, get more offensive linemen, get more defensive linemen. It would absolutely help to add another linebacker. A Sincere Johnson out of the state of Ohio would be easily your best linebacker prospect in this class. And then slowly but surely they'll be finished, but they're done at quarterback. They're done at wide receiver. They could get a tight end, but when you get 3 tight end prospects in the class of 2025, it's safe to say that tight end's not exactly a priority in 2026, even though there are some talented names out there. If they end up with no tight ends in this 2026 class, not going to concern me in the slightest. So there's the outlook at this present moment. Again, going back to Jaziel Hart, he's the latest to join Penn State's class of 2026. Solid commitment there. They fended off some elite competition, to say the least. And now Penn State has 17 commitments in the process. That's going to do it for this bonus edition of Locked On Nittany Lions. Thank you so much for checking out this edition of the show. If you are new to the show, thank you to the everydayers. Become one if you are not already. Subscribe to the YouTube channel and wherever you get your podcasts. Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section. Be a part of the conversation. And for more conversations around your favorite Penn State sports teams, whether it's football, basketball, or wrestling, keep it right here on Locked On Nittany Lions.